Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. So for today's video we have Adam in the background. You can just ignore him. But for today's video I'm going to be doing my what I read in January. So I'm just going to be talking about the books I read and sort of talking about, kind of explaining the general gist of what they were about and my feelings on what I thought of them and if I enjoyed them, and just a bit of a review of the books. So in total I read 7 books in January, which I'm pretty happy with. Because of lockdown and because I've been working from home, I've had a lot more time to read, which has been the best thing. Like, I really fell out of the way of reading when I was in my final couple of years in school and then when I was in university, because I don't say I fell out of the way of reading because I was still reading, but all the reading I was doing was for my course. So I wasn't reading for pleasure, and it's really nice now that I've graduated that I have time to read for pleasure. So during the first lockdown I read 16 books, I think, and then when I was like going out to work I only got through like 3 or 4 because I was so busy. But now we're back in lockdown and I'm just working from home. I have a lot more time and I've spent a lot of that reading, which has been a really nice escape and has really helped me fall in love with reading again, so I'm very grateful for that. So as I said, I read 7 books in January and I'm just going to run through them now and tell you what I thought of them. Okay, so the first book I read in January was Naoise Dolan's Exciting Times, and I was incredibly disappointed by this book. I'm not gonna lie, it was one I was quite looking forward to after seeing so many people talking about it, hearing all these great reviews, and I was just really let down by it. So sorry if I keep looking down. I've written out my notes in this book about what I want to say about the books. Basically the storyline of Exciting Times was a young Irish girl, like I assume she just graduated. She's moved to Hong Kong to teach like a TEFL course in China, so she's teaching Chinese kids to speak English, and basically her love affairs and her life there. And my first thoughts on this book were honestly like, I really don't get what the point of it was. Like, I really don't feel like I took anything away from the story. I don't feel like there was any growth for the protagonist, and I don't feel like I learned anything from this book. So that was kind of disappointing. Okay, so the book's protagonist is called Ava, and she just comes across the whole way as like really overprivileged and unaware of her surroundings and very like narrow-minded and like selfish and immature and like not a very nice person. So there was that, and I thought, oh, like she's gonna have some growth in this story, but we reached the end and she really didn't have any growth at all, and I was like, okay, strange, what was the point of that? Then throughout the book, obviously it's set in Hong Kong, and she makes virtually no effort to immerse herself in the culture of Hong Kong. There's very little mention of life in Hong Kong. Like, this book could literally be set anywhere. There's no sort of like feeling of Hong Kong in the book because most of her friends in the book are white, and she does meet one Chinese girl, but I'll get into that in a little bit. And then obviously there's the Chinese students, but other than that she doesn't really like get involved in the culture. She's hanging out with all her white friends, and yeah, there's just not much interaction with the culture that she's went and chose to live in. So it's kind of like, why did she do that if she's not going to get involved? Even when she does then interact with very few Chinese characters, they're very stereotyped when it comes to like Asian characters. So for example, she gets a girlfriend who is from Hong Kong, and she is presented as the typical like studious, prim, proper Asian student, and then her mother as well is presented as like the sort of like Asian tiger mom stereotype, very strict and all of that. So yeah, it just felt like I was listening to the narrative of like a really bratty 20-something Irish girl who's going out and is just feeling really sorry for herself. Like, she even makes a remark at one point in the book about how she is living in this accommodation, and then she says that the locals wouldn't be able to live in this accommodation, but a big part of that is because of people moving to Hong Kong and taking like building an industry that isn't built for the locals, if that makes sense. So yeah, it just felt like a lot of the time she was like not acknowledging her privilege and sort of just complaining a lot, and I don't know, I just found it really annoying. to read. But it did deal with other issues in quite a good way. Like, it did deal to a certain extent with issues of class and gender in quite a good way, because Ava did have to work while she was out there, whereas one of the men she meets, Julian, he is a rich banker. Like, obviously he's working too, but like he's a lot better off, and it just feels like she's like being very selfish with everything she does. Like, she isn't considering everyone around her. Like, she wants to stay with Julian because she's worried about having to move back to a flat where she's living with housemates she doesn't like. It's just, I don't know, I wasn't overly in love with this book the way everyone else seemed to be, and I hate to come on and feel like I'm slandering, but that's just my feelings on it. If you would like to shed some light in the comments, if I'm missing something, then please do, but that was just my initial feelings on the book. Okay, so the next book I read in January was Kylie Reid's Such a Fun Age, and it's onwards and upwards from here, so I loved this book a lot. So this book follows the story of a young 20-something black woman called Amira Tucker in Philadelphia, and she works as a babysitter for like a white rich blogger, and it sort of is like the dynamic between their relationship throughout. So the story starts off with Amira being called, she was at a friend's birthday party and she is called to take the little girl she babysits, Briar, out because there's been an incident at the house of the blogger, and she takes her to a supermarket, which is one of her favourite supermarkets, the little girl, and they go and look at, I think it's like the Nuts or something, I can't remember, but basically they're like dancing in the aisle. Amira is obviously dressed up in like her going out clothes because she was at a friend's birthday party, and then the security guard comes over and accuses Amira of kidnapping the young girl, and she then has to phone the little girl's dad, to come and be like, no, like, this is our babysitter, it's fine. And while she's doing that, this guy comes along and takes a video of the situation, and he's saying to her like, oh, you could get them in so much trouble for this, you could make a claim from this if you sent this to the news, blah blah blah. And she's like, I don't want to do that because of how it makes me look. And then the story goes on from there. So I feel like in the novel, Reid like does a very like good portrayal of the disparity between people wanting to appear not racist or to appear like they're doing the right thing, compared to actually just treating people properly. Yeah, so she kind of highlights the constant underlying sort of racism that takes place in everyday, like day-to-day society, and kind of highlights that to a really like poignant and very like, it felt really real reading it. So yeah, she sort of like shows the disparity between people actually doing the right thing and like wanting to look like they're doing the right thing, so sort of like appearance versus reality, and people trying to make themselves look a certain way, worrying more about how they look rather than how they are actually behaving, if that makes sense. And I don't mean looks as in appearances, I mean like looks as in how they come across as behaving. So the guy who then takes the video ends up getting to know Amira throughout the book, and his name is Kelly Copeland, and he and the white blogger, her name is Alex, they both use Amira to like make themselves appear more progressive and sort of woke than actually really showing any care for what Amira wants or what actually like she wants. So they don't treat her as a human, like that's kind of how it comes across. They sort of treat her as something different, and they don't really respect what she actually wants. So I feel like this book comes across as like a really real situation, and it was very true to like the society that we're living in today, and it definitely to a point made me reflect upon my own behaviours, because I know that what I do isn't perfect and I can make mistakes, and it just made me think a lot about like how I behave and just things to be aware of. Okay, so the next book I read was Florence Given's Women Don't Owe You Pretty, and I know there's a lot of controversy around this book at the minute. I'm not going to go into that right now, but all I'm going to say is if you're going to explore intersectional feminism, or if you're going to read into intersectionality, you need to be reading from a variety of different writers, a variety of different sources. Like, you can't take all of your information from one source. So that's my take on that. That's all I'm going to say there. This book is branded as an accessible leap into feminism, and I would say that's exactly what it is. It's nothing groundbreaking. There was nothing, if you're aware of feminism or intersectional feminism in any way, then I don't think you're going to learn anything from this book. I don't think you're going to take anything away from it, but if you're brand new to it, then it's a really good place to start. It is very simple and it covers a lot of topics in a very short space of time, and it's a super easy read. Like, I read this in a day because like there isn't really much to it. It's very like graphic and illustrated, so it's a really quick and easy read. And yeah, it's nothing groundbreaking, it's nothing new, it's nothing fresh, but it is a very accessible leap into feminism and a good place to start. But I would say it would be a good book for like sort of younger girls, maybe like 13 to 16 year olds, but I think if you're around maybe 18, if basically if you've been through university, if you're like 18, 19 plus, you probably are aware of everything in this book already, and you're not going to learn anything new from it. Okay, so the fourth book I read in January was Adam Silvera's They Both Die at the End. And so I'd seen this book going around loads of places, heard loads of people talking about it and loads of people recommending it, and I had really high hopes for this book, but I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. It was an easy read. It was like a quick, I don't want to say a nice story. In a way it was a nice story with like a good moral message, but you could probably tell by the title it wasn't exactly a nice story. I was slightly disappointed, but I don't want to say completely, because I think the main problem is I was just a little bit too old for this book. So I do enjoy quite a lot of like young adult fiction, but I would say this is more teen fiction. I would say this is more geared towards the sort of 13-14 year old age range rather than the sort of 16 to 18 age range. So the major part of the reason why I was disappointed with this book is just because I was a little bit too old for it. So it's basically like a futuristic kind of dystopian tale of a world, well not a world, our world in the future, where there's this call line set up where people get a phone call on the day they're going to die saying, this is your last day. So the call line's called Deathcast, and they phone people up and they say this is the day you're going to die, and it basically gives people the opportunity to live out their final day how they would wish, and so as they don't have any regrets. So it follows two boys who meet on an app called Last Friend, and it's set up for so-called deckers, who are people who have got the Deathcast call saying they're going to die that day, and they spend their last day together learning from each other and having a good time together and living out their last day, doing things that they maybe wouldn't have done before, and it shows things they learn and things that they regret doing / not doing in their life, and they reflect. It allows them time to reflect on their life up until that point, because all along they were living believing they had all these years to go, but then they just suddenly didn't. So it is a good message about living every day like it's your last, like seizing the moment, never taking life for granted. But it was just, I found, pretty simple, and I didn't find the story all that emotionally engaging. Like, it didn't really, like, I don't want to come across really heartless, but it just didn't like really like touch me in any kind of way. Like, I wasn't emotional or anything by the end of the story, and it wasn't a massively profound take on the living every day like it's your last message. But yeah, it was a nice story to read, and I did quite like it. So we're following the story of two boys, Mateo and Rufus, and they're the main crux of the story, but then throughout there are other chapters which follow other people who've got the Deathcast call that day, like just sort of short snippets from other people. So it's really interesting in that way to hear stories of other people too. But yeah, like, if I wouldn't not recommend this book if you're looking a quick read and a story of carpe diem and living every day like it's your last. It is a good book, and I would especially recommend it for a younger sort of 13-14 age range audience. Okay, so the 5th book I read this month was probably my favourite book of the entire of January. I keep saying this month and then I need to remember it's not February, but the 5th book I read in January was The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and this has definitely become one of my favourite books of all time. I love this book so much. This is a story, like, I'm very fussy with what I read, as you can probably already tell from this video, and this is a story that really gripped me the whole way through, and it stayed in my head for days after I finished it. Like, I really, like, connected to the characters, and I wanted to tell people about them. Like, this is how I knew that I loved a book, when I read a book and then I want to tell people about this story that I've heard as if it's real. So I really had this with this book. It was just so beautifully written, and it had so many different elements woven into it, and through the stories of the 7 husbands you learn so much about Hollywood, the glamour of it, the seediness of it, all of that, and oh, it was just a wonderful book. So basically the story follows the life of a now elderly Hollywood icon, Evelyn Hugo, and she enlists the help of a young journalist, Monique Grant, to write her memoir. From the outset we're aware that there's a link between Monique and Evelyn, but you don't find out until way later on in the book, and you're sort of gripped to try and find out what that is. I did work it out as soon as it was, I suppose, hinted towards, so I think in that way it's quite a predictable outcome. Like, I think as soon as you say it you will know what the link is, but I think that's because you're looking for it the whole way throughout. But I didn't really mind that. I thought that was because once I thought I had it, I wanted to read on to see if I was right. The story follows Evelyn's life in Hollywood, and it starts with her trying to fight her way into Hollywood in the 1950s and get away from her. So her mother dies when she's really young, and her father is abusive, and she wants to get away from small town life with her dad, and she then uses her femininity and her beauty, like she's meant to be one of the most beautiful women in the world, and she uses that to weave her way into Hollywood, and she does compromise her integrity, but in the world that it was back then for women, she is doing everything she can to get what she wants, and she's not letting anything get in her way. So the story starts with her moving to Hollywood in the 1950s and then follows her right up through her rise to stardom and her being like the height of Hollywood fame and her life there. So the story is full of the glamour of the Hollywood era from the 1950s right up to the 1980s and up to the present day, basically, also alongside the tragedy and seediness that was going on behind the scenes. And every few chapters there is like a news report. I'll try and find one to sort of show you what they look like. So you're hearing the story from Evelyn's point of view because it's basically her memoir that you're reading, and then there's these little news reports scattered throughout, and I found them really interesting because you were able to see what the public was saying through these news reports versus what was actually going on in Hollywood. And it felt like such a realistic story. Like, it felt like I was reading the real memoir of like a Hollywood icon from the time. Like, I want to say like Marilyn Monroe, but as if Marilyn Monroe was still alive today. So in that way it felt really real, and I feel like it was inspired by the real life of someone, because it just felt like such a true story. So throughout it deals with various themes of power, sexuality, race, ambition in a very, very complex way. Like, it definitely shows that no one is perfect, everyone makes mistakes, everyone has their flaws and feelings, whether that be they're too ambitious or they whatever, and you just find all the characters, you just connect them so well. But then it also shows like how much love these people have for their families, and they'll literally do anything for the people they love as well. As you're hearing the story from Evelyn as now like an 80 or 90-year-old woman, you're hearing what she regrets doing and what she doesn't regret doing and what she would go back and change and all of that. So I've left a major story plot out of this review because I feel like it would completely ruin the story, so I don't want to go into that too much. But if you're gonna take one book recommendation from this video, please let it be this one. This book definitely has a place in my heart, and I think it's one I will be rereading again at some point. And apparently they're making a TV drama out of this. I would prefer it to be a movie. I feel like it would make a really good movie. But apparently they're making a TV drama out of this. Maybe if the TV drama goes well, they'll make a movie too. But yeah, I very much enjoyed this. And I think I'm also going to read Daisy Jones and the Six because I've heard amazing things about it as well. And I also just love Taylor Jenkins Reid's writing style. And I really got into the story. Okay, so the next book, the penultimate book I read in January was, if you can see the screen, sorry, it's on my Kindle so you can't really see it massively well, was Beth O'Leary's The Flat Share. And I actually enjoyed this book a lot more than I expected to. Going into it, I was like, it's just gonna be a cheesy rom-com, and in a way it was, but I definitely enjoyed it a lot more than I expected to. So the story follows two 20-somethings living in London, and as you know, London house prices are, like, rent and living costs in London are not the cheapest in the world. So they have this living arrangement where they are sharing a flat and a bed as well, but they have never met, and it's a boy and a girl, well, a man and a woman, and one of them works night shifts and the other one works day shifts. So one of them has the apartment at night and the other one has the apartment in the day. So they have this agreement where they never actually have to meet, and they communicate through notes, and then they end up finally meeting. In some aspects, the book was exactly what I said, very light-hearted, sort of rom-com, like sort of British, just funny, cheery, light-hearted, heartwarming story. But in other ways, it dealt with really serious issues of abuse and gaslighting and working in London in like the busy environment as a 20-something, and moving on from an abusive relationship and flaws in the legal system as one of the male protagonists, Leon, his brother, is wrongly imprisoned for a crime he did not commit. And yeah, I felt like it dealt with the issues of abuse and stalking and gaslighting in a very good way. And it was really nice to see the female protagonist Tiffy learn to come to terms with what she dealt with and learn to love herself and know her own self-worth. Okay, so the final book I read in January was Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. So this book was amazing. I loved it so much. So the story follows the early life and childhood of Maya Angelou living in Jim Crow America in the 1940s. It follows her from the age of 8 to 15, so her memoirs are done in 7 parts. This is part 1, and now I really want to read the rest, I'm not gonna lie. So you see her life in 1940s St. Louis, and then she moves to San Francisco, and it shows the relationships with her family. And my camera cut off there because I got to 25 minutes, but it shows her relationship with her grandparents, who she initially lives with, and then she moves in with her mum, and she moves in with her dad for a short while, and that story is insane. Like, that whole situation with her dad is crazy. But yeah, I feel like part of the reason this story is so powerful is because I feel like Angelou really captures the voice of a young child really well in the way she tells the story. Like, when I was reading it, I really felt like I was hearing it from the perspective of the age she was when she was in this, when she was in this book, when she was living this life. I don't really know how to word that, it's not coming across, but I felt like I was hearing the story from the perspective of an 8 to 15-year-old girl, and she deals with a lot of really dark situations, but she continues to remain positive and hopeful, and she keeps this hopeful and in a way childish spirit, but she's also very mature at the same time. And she discusses her difficult family relationships, as well as the racial discrimination of the Jim Crow South and the sexual discrimination she faces as well, even going into sexual assault, which was a really graphic scene, but it wasn't overtly, it wasn't too far. Everything she says is just so matter-of-factly. She doesn't go into gory detail, it's just matter-of-fact the way she tells the story, and I think that's part of the reason why it feels like you're talking to the child. But yeah, growing up through all that, she still manages to retain this hopeful outlook on life, this positive mindset, and she is realistic, but she never loses that fire. Like, she's told that she can't have this job because they don't employ black people, and she's like, not happening, I'm getting that job, and she gets the job. And it's just a really inspiring read, and I just found it a really powerful tale of courage in adversity, and it really made me feel so lucky to live the life that I'm living. Like, the fact that she still conveys so much joy and happy memories from being a child through everything she went through really made me think about how lucky I am to live the life that I live. And now I just really want to read her other 6 volumes. I really wish I could like speak to her. I'm gonna have to look up so many interviews because I feel like she's just such a wise woman, and yeah, I love this book so much and I would recommend this for anyone. So yeah, that is everything I read in January. I thought it was quite a good reading month. Most of the books I really enjoyed. As I said, there were some I was kind of disappointed by, but overall I really enjoyed most of the books. So yeah, hopefully February will be something similar, and yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to head over and give it a massive thumbs up and subscribe because I upload videos every Wednesday and Sunday. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you soon for a brand new video. Bye!